I should start by saying that I never thought I would find myself in a situation like this. My name is Kyle, and I was married to a woman named Jessica for just over 7 years. For the most part, it felt like a good marriage. We had our ups and downs like any couple, but we genuinely cared for one another. At least, that's what I thought until things began to unravel. Things got rocky around the time we decided to seek marriage counseling. Honestly, I thought it was a positive step. We agreed that improving our communication would help us resolve some lingering tensions. But counseling quickly turned into a slippery slope, and I started noticing changes in Jessica. She was more distant, often glued to her phone and abruptly dismissive whenever I tried to engage her in conversation. At first, I chalked it up to stress related to the sessions. I mean, who doesn't feel a little overwhelmed when discussing your relationship's flaws? But then the signs became too glaring to ignore. She was coming home late from our sessions, saying she had to meet with our therapist, but I began to wonder if something else was going on. The therapist's office was only a few blocks away from where I worked, and I found myself driving by it regularly. One evening, as I passed by, I noticed Jessica's car parked outside. That's when the pit in my stomach started to grow. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but the nagging thoughts kept surfacing. Was she really meeting with the therapist, or was there someone else? I decided to keep an eye on her. I felt like a detective lurking in the shadows, but the more I watched, the more my instincts screamed that something was wrong. Then came the fateful day that would change everything. I had a rare day off, so I decided to surprise her at the office. I imagined her face lighting up when she saw me. Instead, I parked a couple of blocks away and walked over, trying to shake off the feeling of dread that was settling in my chest. As I approached the building, I saw Jessica walking out, laughing and holding hands with someone. I squinted against the bright sun and, to my horror, realized it was her divorce attorney, Mark. Just like that, my heart dropped into the pit of my stomach. They exchanged a quick kiss before she waved goodbye and hopped into her car. I froze, feeling the world tilt on its axis. It was like someone had pulled the rug out from under me, and I was left standing on shaky ground. I can't explain the mix of feelings that washed over me: anger, betrayal, confusion. But the anger was the loudest. Out of nowhere, I found myself confronting them both, still in the parking lot. I must have looked like a madman as I shouted Jessica's name. She turned on her heels, her face paling as she caught sight of me. "What the hell is going on?" I demanded, voice shaking with rage. Mark looked like a deer in headlights, and Jessica quickly stepped in, attempting to play the innocent card. "Kyle, this isn't what it looks like," she exclaimed, her eyes darting nervously. "Oh, really? Because it looks like you're cheating on me with the guy you hired to help you divorce me." I shot back, my voice rising higher. Jessica started spouting a bunch of excuses, claiming that she had only been talking to Mark about our therapy sessions, about how hard it was for her to deal with our issues, but I wasn't having any of it. The evidence was clear, and her frantic attempts to deflect the blame only fueled my anger. In the midst of her scrambling to explain, I couldn't help but feel a sense of disbelief. This was the woman I had shared my life with, the person I had trusted. How could she do this to me? The entire scene felt surreal, like something out of a bad movie. After the confrontation, I went home, feeling like I had been punched in the gut. I sat on the couch in silence, reflecting on everything that had just happened. In that moment, I felt shattered and completely lost, trying to process the betrayal that was thrust upon me. What would I do now? The thought of moving forward without her seemed unbearable, but I knew I couldn't just let this slide. The hours that followed were a blur. I sat on the couch, surrounded by the remnants of our life together, the framed photos, the little trinkets we had collected on vacations. It all felt tainted now. My mind raced with thoughts of Jessica and Mark together, the laughter they had shared and the intimacy that had been stripped away from me. I felt like an outsider in my own home. That night, Jessica arrived home late. She tried to act casual, like nothing had happened, but the tension was palpable. I could see it in her eyes. She was nervous, probably wondering how I would react. I didn't waste any time. As soon as she walked through the door, I confronted her again. "Who is Mark?" I asked flatly, trying to maintain control, though my anger bubbled just beneath the surface. Her facade cracked for a moment and the lies spilled out again. He's just my attorney, Kyle. We were discussing the paperwork for the divorce, that's all. Bullshit, Jessica. I saw you kiss him. I felt my heart racing, the blood pounding in my ears. She shifted uncomfortably, her eyes darting away. Okay, I admit it. It was just a kiss. We were both upset and it was a moment of weakness. I was stunned. A moment of weakness. I could hardly process it. A moment of weakness. You're cheating on me with the guy who's supposed to help you end our marriage and you call it weakness. That's not a moment, Jessica. That's a choice. The argument escalated from there, with her denying the depth of their relationship while I pressed her to admit the truth. The back and forth felt endless, with her weaving more lies, claiming that she didn't know how to handle her feelings about our marriage and that Mark had simply been a shoulder to cry on. In the midst of the chaos, I felt a mixture of anger and disbelief morph into a profound sadness. How had it come to this? The woman I'd loved and trusted had shattered our foundation, and I was left with nothing but the wreckage. I wanted to scream, to cry, to make her feel the pain she had inflicted upon me, but instead I stood there, emotionally paralyzed. After what felt like hours, our shouting matched only by the silence that followed. Jessica stormed out of the house. I didn't stop her. I could hardly breathe, let alone try to reason with her. I grabbed my phone and opened our shared pictures, scrolling through our memories together. Each photo felt like a dagger in my heart. How could the woman I once adored be capable of such betrayal? As the night wore on, I found it increasingly hard to shake the weight of what had happened. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying the confrontation over and over in my mind. I felt sick to my stomach, and it wasn't just from the anger. It was a cocktail of emotions: betrayal, humiliation, rage, and sorrow, all swirling together until I couldn't distinguish one feeling from another. But as the dawn broke, a new resolve began to bloom within me. I couldn't let her or Mark get away with this. I had to do something. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that I didn't need to fight for a relationship that was already broken. If she wanted to end our marriage, I would make sure it was on my terms. I began planning what I would do next. I had grown up watching my parents go through a bitter divorce, and I remembered how my father had let my mother walk all over him. I wasn't going to be that man. If Jessica thought she could betray me without consequences, she had another thing coming. I decided to represent myself in the divorce proceedings. I had no legal background, but I was determined to learn everything I could. I would turn this situation into a lesson, not just for her, but for myself. I would not only fight for what was rightfully mine, but also show Jessica that I wouldn't be her punching bag any longer. I finally had a direction. I would gather evidence, document everything, and approach the negotiations with a strategy that would leave her no choice but to respect me. I was done playing the victim. From this point forward, I would take control of my life. Jessica might have thought she was clever, but I was about to turn the tables. With this newfound determination, I started mapping out my next moves. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but I was ready to walk it. It was time for justice, my justice. The days after the confrontation passed in a haze of preparation and fury. I became laser-focused on gathering evidence, transforming my feelings of betrayal into a drive for justice. I researched divorce laws like a student cramming for finals, and I began to track Jessica's movements. I couldn't believe I was doing this, spying on my own wife, but I needed the proof that would back me up in our eventual legal battle. One afternoon, I decided to follow her. I had noticed she had been meeting with Mark more frequently, often under the pretense of business meetings related to the divorce. I wasn't going to let the situation play out without understanding the full scope of their involvement. I parked a few blocks away from a cafe where I had seen Jessica and Mark share coffee a couple of times. I sat in my car, heart racing with a mix of anxiety and adrenaline. After what felt like an eternity, I saw her pull up. She stepped out of her car, looking casual in a sundress, and walked in with a smile. I felt sick watching her. I had once loved that smile. Now it felt like a betrayal. For the next hour, I sat there, replaying every moment in my head. I couldn't have imagined the depths of her duplicity. I watched as Mark arrived and my stomach twisted into knots. They hugged as friends would and then they sat down together, leaning in close, whispering, like they were sharing secrets meant for only each other. It was maddening. I snapped a few photos documenting their interaction because I knew I needed tangible evidence. I had to calm myself down and focus. This was about reclaiming my life and ensuring she couldn't walk all over me. My heart sank further when I saw them share a laugh, leaning in closer, and I suddenly felt overwhelmed. I had to get out of there before I did something rash. That evening, I reviewed the photos I had taken. The visual proof was shocking and infuriating. I couldn't shake the feeling that Jessica was not just emotionally cheating on me, but that she had crossed an unspoken line into something physical. The way they looked at each other was casual yet intimate, and it made my blood boil. I had poured my soul into our relationship, believing we had a future together, and here she was, betraying me with the very person meant to help navigate our divorce. I spent the next few days collecting more evidence. I set up cameras around the house, documenting any late nights and suspicious behavior. I also started going through our shared finances, looking for any signs of infidelity, money spent on gifts or dinners that didn't involve me. As I pieced together her lies, I could feel the anger boiling inside me, but I also understood that I had to keep a cool head. I reached out to people who had been through similar experiences, reading about their journeys and how they navigated the treacherous waters of divorce. This was all new territory for me, and I needed to equip myself with the right tools. I even consulted a few online forums where people shared their stories of betrayal and revenge. The more I read, the more empowered I felt to take control of my situation. Then came the day I decided to confront Jessica once more. I felt ready. I had the evidence, and I was ready to make her see the reality of what she had done. I didn't want to let her keep spinning the narrative that she was the victim. I wanted to expose her lies. When she came home that evening, I was waiting for her in the living room. The air felt thick, charged with the weight of unspoken words. The moment she stepped in, I knew. I had to maintain my composure. "Jessica, we need to talk," I said, my tone steady. She looked taken aback, her eyes darting nervously. "About what, Kyle?" I pulled out my phone and displayed the photos I had taken outside the cafe. As she glanced at the screen, her face drained of color. "What is this?" she stammered, trying to regain her footing. "It's proof, Jessica, proof that you're cheating on me with Mark, the same man you hired to help you end our marriage. How long has this been going on?" Her mouth opened and closed, searching for words that wouldn't come. I didn't mean for you to find out like this," she finally managed to say, her voice trembling. "Save it. You've lied to me repeatedly, and I'm done with your excuses. This isn't just a moment of weakness. This is a calculated betrayal. You've disrespected our marriage, and you've disrespected me." Her eyes filled with tears, and for the briefest moment I felt a flicker of sympathy. But it was quickly overshadowed by the overwhelming hurt and anger. "Look, Kyle, I was confused. I didn't know how to handle the pressure, and things just spiraled out of control. I made a mistake." "A mistake? This isn't a mistake, Jessica. It's a choice you made. You chose to betray the trust we built over years. You chose to kiss him, to laugh with him while I was at home trying to save our marriage." I felt a sense of power surge through me. I was finally standing up for myself, confronting the situation head-on. But as I looked into her eyes, I also saw a glimmer of something, guilt or perhaps fear, but it didn't matter anymore. There was no reconciliation in sight. I had made my decision. "I'm not going to keep playing this game," I said, my voice firm. "I'm going to take charge of this divorce, and I'm not going to let you walk away without consequences. You'll see how this ends." And with that, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. I was no longer a passive participant in my life. I was reclaiming my narrative. Jessica may have thought she could manipulate the situation, but I was ready to fight back. The journey ahead would be tough, but I was prepared to face it head-on. After the confrontation, a sense of clarity emerged like a ray of sunlight breaking through the storm clouds of my mind. I had taken a bold step forward, but the path ahead was still littered with uncertainty. I knew I had to tactically approach the divorce proceedings, and I began formulating a plan that would not only protect my interests, but also give Jessica a taste of the consequences of her actions. I spent hours researching divorce laws, understanding my rights, and learning about the process of separation. I reached out to friends who had gone through similar experiences, gathering advice and insights. They offered stories about their own battles and how they had triumphed over betrayal. I felt a growing confidence as I armed myself with knowledge. I would not allow Jessica to manipulate me any further. I focused on building my case. I had my photos, timestamps, and evidence of her late nights out with Mark. I even went through our financial records, discovering that she had secretly paid for dinners and hotel rooms under her personal accounts, expenses that clearly indicated she had been living a double life. This was a goldmine of evidence that I could utilize in our negotiations. As I prepared to confront her again regarding the divorce terms, I felt a mixture of anticipation and dread. I knew I had to remain calm and composed. This was a business transaction now, not an emotional battleground. When I called Jessica to set up a meeting, my heart raced. She agreed to come over, and I spent the next few hours pacing, mentally rehearsing what I would say. When she arrived, I could see the tension in her posture. She had clearly spent time trying to gather herself, appearing composed but with a hint of anxiety in her eyes. I gestured for her to sit. "Thanks for coming," I said, trying to keep my tone neutral. "I think it's important we discuss the divorce terms clearly and openly." Her expression shifted, and I could sense her trying to gauge the situation. "Kyle, about what happened. I didn't mean to hurt you. I know I messed up," she began, her voice shaky. "Let's focus on the divorce," I interrupted, wanting to avoid getting trapped in an emotional spiraling again. "I have some evidence of your infidelity, photos, details of your meetings with Mark. I believe this will help us in the negotiations." Her eyes widened in shock, and I saw the color drain from her face. You have proof?" She stammered, momentarily speechless. "Yes, and based on everything I've found, I'm going to require full disclosure of our finances and assets. We need to discuss alimony, and I want joint custody of the dog," I stated firmly, trying to keep my voice steady. "I don't think it has to go this way," she protested, her voice rising slightly. "I thought we could work through it. This isn't about working through our marriage anymore, Jessica. This is about holding you accountable for what you did. You've made your choices, and now I'm going to make mine," I replied, the anger flaring just beneath the surface but controlled. I laid out my terms, detailing how I expected the division of assets to proceed. I was surprised by how well I was articulating myself. I had come into this with a newfound sense of purpose, and I wasn't going to let her guilt trip me into submission. Jessica listened, her expression shifting from denial to frustration. "You're being unreasonable, Kyle. I never wanted it to get this far. Can't we just—" "No, we can't just sweep this under the rug," I interrupted, feeling the volume of my voice rising again. "You made a choice to betray me, and now we must deal with the consequences. I'm not going to let you manipulate the narrative." As the meeting progressed, I laid out my expectations clearly, and to my surprise, Jessica started to soften a little. I could see the realization dawning on her that I was serious about taking control, but she was still trying to salvage something. "Please, Kyle, let's not make this ugly," she pleaded, her voice dropping to a softer tone. "We can find a middle ground." I could feel the weight of her words. Part of me wanted to believe her, to think we could come to an amicable resolution, but I also knew what lay beneath that facade, the deceit and betrayal. I shook my head, resolute. "I'm done protecting your feelings, Jessica. You had your chance to be honest with me, and you chose to betray that trust. There will be no middle ground here." The conversation dragged on, with her trying to negotiate and plead her case. I stood firm. I had decided to take the high road and approach this divorce with a sense of dignity and strength. I was determined to walk away with what was fair, not just for myself, but also to set an example of strength in the face of betrayal. After several hours of back-and-forth discussions, we finally reached a tentative agreement. I could see the frustration etched on her face, but I also saw a flicker of resignation. She realized the jig was up. It was hard to see someone I once loved in such a vulnerable position, but it was necessary. I was no longer the man she could manipulate. The agreement wasn't ideal for either of us, but it was a start, and I felt a sense of accomplishment. As Jessica left that evening, I closed the door behind her and took a deep breath. I felt empowered, like I had taken my life back into my own hands. In the days that followed, I continued gathering evidence, drafting paperwork, and preparing for what I knew would be a contentious legal battle. I was ready for whatever came next. I would not be a victim of her choices any longer. This was my journey now, and I was determined to emerge from the ruins stronger than ever. As the days turned into weeks, the reality of the divorce proceedings began to set in. I had entered a new phase of my life, one filled with uncertainty but also a surprising sense of liberation. With every email I sent, every document I filed, and every piece of evidence I gathered, I felt my confidence grow. No longer was I the man who stood idly by nursing wounds. I was the architect of my future. Jessica and I had settled into a new, tense dynamic. We were still living in the same house, which had become increasingly unbearable. The atmosphere was thick with unspoken words and lingering resentment. While I focused on the logistics of our impending divorce, she continued to reach out, often trying to engage in conversations about what could have been. Each time she attempted to rekindle some semblance of our relationship, I was reminded of her betrayal, the way she had betrayed not just me, but our shared life. One evening, as I sat working on my laptop at the dining room table, I glanced up to see Jessica standing in the doorway, her expression softening. "Can we talk?" she asked tentatively. I sighed, knowing that talking was often a guise for her to plead her case or to manipulate the situation. "About what?" I kept my tone neutral, careful to keep my guard up. "I know things have been rough, but I still care about you. I want us to reach an understanding," she said, her voice tinged with sincerity. "Understand this, I'm not interested in rekindling anything. You made your choice and I'll never forget that," I replied, cutting her off before she could continue. Tension crackled in the air as Jessica shifted uncomfortably. "I didn't realize how much I could hurt you. It was never my intention to hurt you like this," she said, her eyes misting over. "But you did, Jessica. You chose to be with him while pretending to work on our marriage. You threw away everything we built together." "That was a mistake, a huge mistake," she replied, her voice cracking. "Stop using mistake as your get-out-of-jail-free card," I countered, feeling the anger bubbling back to the surface. "You knew exactly what you were doing. You're not a victim here." The conversation spiraled from there, and I found myself digging deeper into my anger. I wanted her to understand the pain she had caused, to feel the weight of her decisions. But the more I pressed, the more defensive she became, and I realized that this was a futile exercise. I had to accept that she would never fully grasp the extent of her betrayal. As the days rolled on, I became engrossed in my legal preparations. I secured a lawyer, a fierce woman named Sarah who had a reputation for winning tough cases. She was exactly what I needed, someone who understood the ins and outs of divorce law and who would fight for my rights. With her guidance, I felt even more empowered. We began strategizing, and I meticulously documented every piece of evidence I had gathered, laying it out like a case in court. I wanted to go in fully prepared to demand what I deserved. I was not looking for revenge per se, but I wanted to ensure that Jessica faced the consequences of her actions. Meanwhile, Jessica's behavior began to shift. She seemed less confident, often on edge, which made me wonder if the gravity of the situation was finally hitting her. Occasionally, she would bring up potential compromises, but I remained firm. I didn't want to negotiate my dignity or my self-respect. One night, after a particularly tense conversation about our finances, I caught her staring at me from across the room. It was an unusual moment of vulnerability, and for just a heartbeat I saw a glimmer of the woman I once loved. But that moment was fleeting. "Do you ever think about what could have been?" she asked softly, her voice breaking the silence. "Honestly, Jessica, sometimes. But I think about it while realizing that what we had was built on trust. You threw that away," I said, my tone steady. I could see her grappling with regret, but I also knew that there was no going back. I had to stay focused on the future, even if it meant letting go of the past. As I continued preparing for the divorce proceedings, I found solace in working out, reconnecting with friends, and even picking up new hobbies. I had started going to a local gym, pushing my limits, and it felt good to channel my energy into something productive. I began to rediscover parts of myself that had been overshadowed by the turmoil of our marriage. Then came the day of the negotiation meeting. I woke up early, feeling a mix of nerves and determination. I knew this would set the tone for the divorce, and I was ready to stand my ground. As I put on my suit, I felt a surge of confidence. I was no longer the man who had been hurt. I was the man ready to reclaim his life. In the meeting room, I faced Jessica and her attorney on the opposite side of the table. I could see the tension radiating from Jessica as she nervously tapped her fingers on the table. I took a deep breath, reminding myself of the strength I had cultivated. With Sarah by my side, we laid out our case, presenting the evidence I had gathered. I spoke clearly, articulating my needs and expectations. I could see Jessica's expression shift from defiance to concern as I detailed the financial implications of her actions. The discussion was heated, but I remained calm and composed. I wasn't going to let her manipulate me or make me feel small. I was determined to ensure that she understood the gravity of her actions. After several intense hours, we finally reached an agreement. It wasn't perfect, but it was fair given the circumstances. Jessica agreed to pay a substantial amount in alimony, and I would retain our dog, which felt like a small victory amidst the chaos. As I walked out of that meeting, I felt lighter. It was a significant step forward in my journey to reclaiming my life. I looked back one last time at the woman I had once loved, realizing that while our marriage had crumbled, I was laying the groundwork for a new beginning. I had learned that betrayal could break you, but it could also forge you anew. I was no longer defined by my past, but by the choices I made in the face of adversity. I was ready to embrace whatever came next. The weeks following the negotiation meeting were a mix of relief and newfound opportunity. I was officially out of the marriage, and while the journey through the divorce was grueling, it was also a transformative experience. I had stepped out of the shadows of betrayal and into the light of self-empowerment. I moved into a small apartment, a cozy space that felt like a fresh start. The first night in my new home, I sat on the couch, a simple piece of furniture I had picked up secondhand, and stared out the window. The weight of the past began to lift, and I could feel the corners of my mouth curling up into a smile. I was free, truly free, and I could finally breathe again. I threw myself into my new life. I embraced the gym routine I had started, waking up early to lift weights and run. I began meeting new people, forging friendships that were untainted by betrayal. I even signed up for a cooking class, something I had always wanted to do but never found time for during the marriage. It felt exhilarating to rediscover myself, to remember who I was outside of the confines of my former relationship. But I didn't forget what had happened. I carried the lessons learned through the pain, and I reflected on them often. The betrayal had opened my eyes to the importance of trust and honesty in any relationship. It reminded me to value not only my worth but also the importance of ensuring that I never again allowed someone to take advantage of my kindness. One evening, while I was preparing dinner in my new apartment, my phone buzzed with a message from Jessica. I hadn't heard from her since the divorce was finalized, and to be honest, I didn't expect to. But there it was, a simple "Hey, can we talk?" I hesitated, my heart racing. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to push it aside and continue my new life without any lingering ties to my past. But another part, a more curious part, wondered what she could possibly have to say after everything. I decided to respond, agreeing to meet in a neutral location, one of the cafes we used to frequent. When I arrived, I saw her seated at a table near the window, looking as if she had aged a decade since the last time I'd seen her. The tension hung in the air like a thick fog. She looked up as I approached, and I could see the vulnerability in her eyes. "Hi, Kyle," she said quietly. "Hey, Jessica," I replied, sitting down opposite her. The conversation began hesitantly. She started by apologizing for everything, the affair, the lies, the way she had hurt me. I could tell she had rehearsed her words, but it didn't matter. I had moved past the anger and resentment. I had made peace with the past. "I understand that I destroyed your trust," she said, her voice shaking. "I've been doing a lot of thinking, and I realize now how wrong I was to think I could have it both ways. I was selfish and immature." I listened quietly, letting her words wash over me. This wasn't the first time I had heard an apology from her, but this one felt different. There was no expectation of forgiveness, only a desire to acknowledge her mistakes. "I just wanted you to know that I've been working on myself," she continued. "I've been in therapy, and I'm trying to be a better person. I know I can't change the past, but I wish I could." "Jessica, I appreciate you saying that," I replied, choosing my words carefully. "But the damage is done. I've had to rebuild my life without you, and I'm okay with that. I needed to find my own path, and I'm grateful for the lessons I learned through this." She nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. "I don't expect you to forgive me or to ever want to get back together. I just wanted to say that I'm sorry for everything, and I genuinely hope you find happiness." I nodded, understanding that this was her way of seeking closure. "Thank you for saying that. I've found a new direction in life, and I hope you do too," I said, my tone firm yet compassionate. With that, we discussed lighter topics for a bit, reminiscing about the good times we had shared. It was bittersweet, a reminder of what had once been, but also a reflection of how far I had come. When we parted ways, I felt a sense of finality. It was a moment of closure that I didn't know I needed, and I walked away from that cafe feeling lighter than air. As I settled back into my life, I focused on what lay ahead. I continued investing in myself, building new relationships, deepening friendships, and pursuing my interests. I even started dating again, taking it slowly and enjoying the thrill of meeting new people. Each new experience felt like a step further away from the pain of my past and closer to the life I envisioned for myself. Reflecting on the entire saga, I realized that while Jessica's betrayal had taken me by surprise, it had also been a catalyst for transformation. I emerged from the darkness with a clearer understanding of my worth and the importance of surrounding myself with individuals who valued honesty and respect. I often found myself sharing my story with friends or in casual conversations, not as a tale of woe, but as a lesson in resilience. I learned that it's essential to prioritize self-respect and to never allow anyone to undermine your value. In the end, what I had initially perceived as a tragedy turned into a powerful testament of self-discovery and growth. I was no longer defined by someone else's choices. I was a man ready to embrace life on my own terms. And that, I realized, was the most liberating feeling of all.